Hi, back to Jim Siebert. It's time for our tropical forecast to give you an update what's happening out there in the tropics. This is post-tropical cyclone Henri, which has just barely been downgraded. However, it's kind of been like this for a while. It's more of a rainstorm at this point. The problem is it really isn't moving anywhere in a hurry. As you can see, it's been drifting more to the west. Now it's heading back to the east. So it just continues to spin, continues to rain in the northeast and the New England area all the way down into New York. They're seeing some of that rainfall as well, but those winds continue to downgrade. So that's the current storm. There's no other current storms out there except there's things that are probably going to become storms in the very near future. So there's three things that we're tracking. All three of them at this point are not organized and not expected to for the next day or so, but are expected to become something after we get to that. So these first two are way out here in the Atlantic. They're never as much of a concern for us. Of course, anything that develops in the Caribbean starts to get our attention just a little bit anyway. So at the moment, there's what's left over of Henri. We still have very quiet weather here. Nothing expected to happen in the Gulf of Mexico for the next several days, but that does change after that. Now, these first two storms, both of them have a 0% chance right now of organizing for the next day or so. I do believe that this next one, the furthest one away from us, will have a little better chance, but within the next 5 days, it goes up to a 40% chance for them to both organize. As we come back a little bit closer to us here, and this is going to have a 40% chance also of organizing the next 5 days or so. Now here's where it gets interesting. Okay, most of the computer models, now I've been tracking this whole possibility now for the last 5 days, 6 days or so, and the computer modeling has been kind of consistent until today. Now, one of the things why I'm showing you this high pressure here, this has been a big one. The high pressure here and the high pressure over Bermuda basically has been kind of blocking things from coming towards Texas. So anything that would come into the Gulf today, for example, would get shoved into Mexico. That's exactly what happened with Grace, right? Grace came into the Gulf of Mexico, got pushed down into way to the south of us. So what's going to happen though, this is going to start to move to the north. It's going to kind of erode a little bit. So we're going to see some movement with the high pressure. And because of that, now we're beginning to see some changes in the modeling. Now, this is the GFS. So here comes this disturbance. There it is. Not all that organized as of yet, but starts to get a little bit better by Saturday. So this is Saturday, 1 p.m. Now watch what happens once it comes into the Gulf. It stays down here in the Gulf. So this has been kind of the consensus of what most of the modeling has been saying for the last 5 days, that this would stay in the southern Gulf of Mexico. And that's what the GFS is saying right now. Now I'm going to show you the European model, and this has actually changed in the last 24 hours. So there's disagreement, and it's a pretty good big disagreement between the GFS and the European, and they're two of the big models that we track all the time because they tend to be really good models. So let's see what happens. So here comes the European model, and it doesn't organize quite as much until we get to about Saturday. Then here's where things get interesting. You see when it came into the Gulf what it did? Instead of going south into Mexico, it starts bringing it in towards Texas. So that would be Monday. So we're talking a week from now. Now here's the good and bad of it, okay? When we're looking at long-range models, we always have to be careful showing you those kinds of things because they're going to change. And I don't want anybody now to look at this and say, oh, we're now going to have a hurricane in southeast Texas, because you can't say that. That's not what this is telling us right now. What it's telling us is that we know that we're probably going to have some type of area of low pressure in the Gulf of Mexico by the end of the weekend into the first part of next week, okay? But that's all we really know. What we also don't know is, one, how strong it would be. Two is which solution is more correct or less correct. And again, these are two models. We have 50 that we look at, all right? There's a whole bunch of modeling that we look at, but it just gets too complicated to try and show everything on television. So what does this mean? This means that we have to watch what's going to happen down here, and when we'll have a better idea. So now each model run, we're going to take a look to see which one's more consistent. Now, at first glance, when I see this, the GFS and the European for the last 5 or 6 days have been pretty consistent in pushing this into Mexico. So that's been the consensus, and suddenly we have something very different. So my first suspect would be, well, maybe the Europeans seeing something different, obviously, than what the GFS and other modeling has been saying. So if something's different, my first thought is, well, we'll have to wait and see if that has any value or not. But we really won't know for another 24 hours. We'll just keep monitoring. And once we see, if we see the GFS start to shift in the same direction as the European, then we start to say, okay, now we do need to be careful about this because something has changed in the forecast. Now, what will have changed, it really depends on the high pressure to what we've got right now and the high pressure that's out in the Atlantic. If that moves just in the right amounts, and again, we're talking a week from now, so the modeling has to look at all sorts of things between now and the next 7 days to try and figure out what's going to happen. This is going to change. Both the GFS and the European models are not perfect, certainly not 7 days out. They're not going to give us the exact thing that's going to happen here. They're giving us a guide. And what they're both saying right now is we just need to watch and monitor what could happen in the southern Gulf, at least at this point, and then we have to determine whether or not it'll be any different as we get a little bit closer. But it's just too far away to know. We do not know what's going to happen. So I always say this time of year, though. You always need to be prepared. Anyway, it's just a good idea before anything ever happens that you just have your hurricane supplies, you have your things in place, because things can change, and they will change. Now, having said this, the long-range models, again, also point that about September 5th, so 4th, 5th, 6th, somewhere in there, that another area of low pressure is going to come in the eastern Gulf and do something over there, possibly. So we're at that time of hurricane season where we get to the last part of August, the first part of September. That's, as we know, the height of hurricane season is when things can possibly happen, and we just have to continue to watch these. So at this point, this is going to be something we will continue to monitor, and we'll have a better idea. With 24 hours from now, when I have my next update for you, I'm going to have a better idea of which model seems to be the closest, or if they both start coming back together. Because usually what happens is one moves first, and then they tend to draw back closer together. So we'll see about that. But for now, just be very patient. Don't get overly excited about anything, and we'll see what happens, and we'll talk to you soon.